and their messages and so forth.
I'm sorry, I completely forgot to record at the beginning.
That's
So
and of course they tell lots of old war stories. I mean, tons of war stories at St. Patrick's Seminary. They
And
had
Gary, where's St. Patrick's? Where is St. Patrick's?
It's in Menlo Park, and
Oh, okay.
it's the
Kind of the San
seminary
Francisco
for San Francisco,
Okay.
Oakland.
Okay.
Bay Area.
It has now become far different from what it was after Corleone took it over, but they tell a lot of war stories about things, and they had a tremendous. I mean, their stories are they remember lots and lots and lots of little things. So
Anyway, back to the question of
yeah, I would be interested in those two people being part of this. I would be very interested.
Me too.
Me too.
me too.
so So I
At
could-
least for a guest and to make sure that, you know, they
Yeah.
all,
And so between the two, Ferric, which one do you think would be the most compatible with this motley crew that you see on your screen?
well, my thought would be to invite both to
Yeah,
the same session.
I would
That
think
way
so.
it would be, and if you wanted, Tom, you could moderate it or I could moderate it to kind of, since there'd be more of us, to make sure everybody gets their viewpoint in, you know, and to kind of, if there needs to be anybody saying, oh, well, why don't we start off this way? You know, each of us would introduce ourselves, gives our backgrounds, and then maybe hand it over to Bob Bonneau first, and then Frank Daly, and then questions, and let it go from there, something like that.
Good. There's a phenomenon going on here in my area of, and I don't know the precise word, but it's an ordinariate where Episcopal priests are petitioning to become Catholic priests.
Right. Yeah,
And in fact, there is a young fellow who lives just across the border into South Carolina who is studying, and apparently the bishop of this ordinariate is in Houston or Dallas, and I think that there are about 40 parishes that have been set up by these former Episcopal priests, now Catholic priests around the United States. And there is a real effort to set one up here in Western North Carolina. And Joshua, who is this young fellow who was actually I believe a Baptist or Methodist minister, converted to Catholicism. No, I don't want to say that. Anyways, yeah, I think he converted to Catholicism. No, I'm gonna back up. Anyway, he is in seminary with this ordinariate, and his effort is to set up a parish here in Western North Carolina that would be attractive to Episcopalians, Anglicans, and Methodists. And there's a group of about 40 or 50 people who have associated themselves with this ordinariate here. And what he's able to do is he brings ordinariate priests into Hendersonville, to our Church of Immaculate Conception, on like a monthly basis, and they say mass. And the group that has become converted and who really is kind of at the heart of this new parish are men, women, and families that have converted from Methodism, Anglicanism, Episcopalianism. And they're very reluctant to try to reach out and pilfer members of our parish. In other words, you know, although there are several members, couples in our parish that I know are joining the ordinariate, mainly because I think they're being influenced by the quality of the secular priests, the diocesan priests that we have here. And I'm wondering if any of you guys have had any experience with Episcopal priests who have become Catholic priests, bringing their families in and all of that stuff, because it's just,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, it's
There was
really
a-
cool.
Steve Lopes is the bishop of that ordinariate.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
When I was on my sabbatical in Rome, for the couple of months that we had it, Steve had been ordained. He's from San Francisco. His father was a priest. His mother, I think she might have been a nun. And Steve was like, to me, when I first, he had been ordained the year before. Then he went back to what George the Casa in, what's the post when they go back to Tom. That's probably where you went, Tom. The
Casa
Casa de
Maria,
Santa Maria, where
Yeah.
the
Via
guys
del
go back
Umiltà.
an extra year or two to get a canon law degree or whatever else. And Steve came for dinner one night. We met at Soiree down in a little pizzeria below the North American College. When I first met him, I said, "My God, this guy was born to be a Roman bishop."
Really.
He talks. He's a nice fellow, but he has this way of speaking. So he's the head of the ordinariate. In
Yeah.
Palm Springs, down in the desert, there are at least two parishes where the pastor is a former Episcopalian priest.
Okay.
And one of them was very popular, named Howard Lincoln. He has a parish. I mean, in the wintertime, I mean, they have to have traffic control, the numbers of people that go there. Howard Lincoln just retired.
Retired and then he married.
And he just got married.
I think he married his housekeeper.
He did his secretary.
Secretary, yeah.
Thing like that. I mean, and he proclaimed, of course, that it was a non-sexual relationship that they had all this
Yeah.
time. But anyway, but
And it would continue to be, I think.
that has, I think Levada, when he was the what was the head of the CDF, fostered that movement, because a lot of the Episcopal priests, they didn't like the liberal sense of the Anglican Church, and they wanted something more
Yeah.
conservative.
Yeah.
So-
Gary, I actually knew Lincoln slightly because,
Did you?
yeah, Betty's brother was his bishop.
Yes, of course.
And and it was in the waning days of his episcopacy out there that Lincoln announced his
Yeah.
plan, so forth. And Lincoln, I just thought it was ingenious because his successor
Is an
as
Episcopal.
the Roman Catholic pastor of this powerhouse parish in the desert is one of these Episcopalian
Yes.
transplants
Yes.
who himself is married.
Mary, yes.
Ergo, what's the scandal? What's the big deal?
Yeah.
Was sort of the message to
Yeah.
the people.
Well,
And
Lincoln-
I think it was received that way.
Lincoln was highly
Very slick.
well known in that whole desert area.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
had a number of times. I went to mass there all the time, and
Well, we have too, and a very good homilist.
yeah,
Didn't you think?
yeah. I mean, yes.
Well,
he's very faithful.
I've been to a couple of masses of the ordinariate. And it reminds me of one time we were in London and we went to Westminster Abbey for mass. And I just don't like the music. I'm going to be honest. I just don't care for that high church music, nor does Sandra. But what was interesting just to observe was it was appealing to a lot of young families. And our parish has become aged. I mean, mainly because we're a very popular destination for retirees here in Western North Carolina. And so we are a magnet for old farts, like we moved from Florida, and a lot of people have moved from the Midwest and New England. And the other major 50% of the people in our church are Hispanics. We went to Christmas Eve Mass, and there aren't a whole lot of Anglos there that I see, but I'll tell you what, the Hispanics are very, very present. And so this young ordinary parish, and they haven't come up with a name yet, and they are very much in the embryonic stage. It's just all young families. It's just kind of amazing, and they're all converts. Every one of them is a convert to Catholicism, and so they were not like us guys, you know, born into the Catholic culture and Catholic religion, and it's just a fun thing to see. It really is. And the dilemma, though, is because they don't have a facility, the only place that mass can be said is in our church. And the bishop of this diocese has originally said, yes, we will cooperate. And I think we will cooperate. We'll make our facilities available, as long as they don't conflict. And I think that's working out pretty well. I think it's working out pretty well. In fact, 2 weeks ago during the Marian week, my pastor and this young man who's in seminary jointly gave a presentation on Mary. Joshua did one part and Father Cook did another part. And so I just was wondering if and so Gary, that's kind of a small world that that one and only bishop. Yeah. I've heard him preach. I've watched some of his masses on YouTube. He's a really great homilist, just wonderful.
How
Yeah.
was that whole thing received by the Anglican Communion when Benedict did that? It was almost like, Ferry, you'll know this. I
Yeah.
mean, it seemed to me it was almost a sneak attack.
Well, I don't think there's a problem because there's an equal number of Catholic priests going over
Catholics.
to being Episcopalian. So there's no problem there. There's even a nun who'd been at a school in Pasadena who's a woman Episcopal priest, Alice Callahan.
Yeah,
And,
whom I know.
Yeah, whom you know. And so I don't think there's any problem. I was under the impression that when Episcopal priests were received into the Catholic Church, that they wouldn't be given parish ministries. They would be given administrative ministries so as not to scandalize the laity with married priests, something like that. But obviously that's changed.
In fact, 4 pastors ago at our church, but it's about 25 years ago, decided to leave. He was a Franciscan, and he left the order and he left the priesthood and he moved to the really nice local Episcopal church here in town and got married. Kind of set shockwaves through the parish because the Episcopal church is about a block away from Immaculate Conception. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cross traffic.
When I first came up here, when I came to Petaluma the first time when I was an associate after my 5 years in Healdsburg, I met a guy named Dominic Cerubi. I think he had been a San Francisco priest who got married and became an Episcopal priest, and it was serving in, I think, the Episcopal parish in Sebastopol. And one night I had dinner with the guy, the Episcopal priest and his wife, Godfrey Hartzell, and his wife, and Dominic and his wife. It was an interesting evening, and but I remember Dominic saying, that he wanted to be married, but he wanted to stay a priest, and the Episcopal church was where he could do that. And he said to me, there's no difference. I mean, the ministry, the activity, the liturgy, I mean, for him was just quite comfortable. It wasn't a major shift for him, other than he was married. So
They're more literate, aren't they?
I'm sorry?
It seems to me the Episcopal Church is more literate. That's not the right word, but they, their masses are in a higher English than ours.
In the more high
More
church.
elegant.
My old pastor, Clyde Tillman, who was my second pastor after Fred Lawrence, I had Jack O'Hare for 5 years, and then I went from him to a guy named Clyde Tillman. It was like going from day to night. It was a whole different experience. but he used to call the Episcopalians were the elite meat to eat, you know. And but they are, well, George, you go to St. Albans there.
Yeah, I do.
It'd
Yeah.
be more high church, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
think so.
I think most Episcopal churches have communion every
Yeah.
service or every Sunday instead of being a low church. Some people call them God's frozen people, you know, because of the formality of it.
Yes.
But I think that's a little bit in the past, don't you? I think there's a lot of
Well, I-
liveliness and
I experienced, I mean, whenever I've been with Episcopal priests or and Lutherans, I feel a kinship. I mean, sometimes I'm closer to them than I am to Roman Catholic priests in my own diocese. So,
yeah,
you know,
Yeah, well-
theologically and spiritually and in every other way, really.
yeah. It's kind of like being cousins.
And you mentioned that in your, yeah, in one of your little things, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in a ministerial association in Highland Park and became good friends with an Episcopal priest and a Lutheran priest. And the same thing, you know, I think a common spirit, a common, I know Daniel Bergen. Fred, do you remember Daniel Bergen coming to Rome and giving a talk during the council?
Yeah, very well.
And he was saying that you know, lines are not drawn between denominations, but they're within denominations. He feels
Mhm.
closer to some Methodists, some, you know what I mean? It goes across the official
Mhm.
label, and it has to do with more the spirit of how people are living out their Christianity. Anyway, that's, you know, stuck with me, and it fits in with what you're saying, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy named Tim Kellgren who was the Lutheran pastor here and Elam Lutheran, and he was I mean, theologically, I mean, I think the two of us spiritually click. I mean, very much, and I mean, he did all these. To me, he was the epitome of a real cleric. What your life should end up being. He was part of the genesis of two major programs here. One is housing for low-income housing for people, and the other is a thing called COTS, which is the Committee on the Shelterless, which is a wonderful organization for people who are in poverty or homeless, and they do great work. And Tim was part of all of that. When he retired, he used to come to St. Vincent's for mass because he couldn't go back to his old church, his
Yeah.
own church. He had to go to something else, so he came to St. Vincent's.
Did you ever do any joint liturgies like marriages
No,
and
never.
things?
We
Okay.
did that in Healdsburg, but I never did
Okay.
anything here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
On
I tell you guys one more story.
yeah.
It just, it's just crazy. So across the border in South Carolina, the whole state of South Carolina is the Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina. And there is a parish that some friends of mine, some guys in my Curcio group, have started to go to instead of staying here at Immaculate Conception. In the parish, it's in Greenville, South Carolina, which is a real vibrant, thriving, beautiful community. The parish is called St. Mary's, and they have an African pastor who everybody in the parish loved. I mean, they just absolutely loved him. Well, several months ago, it was determined. Hang on, let me turn my phone. It was determined that he had been having an affair with a parishioner. And so, you know, he immediately was removed. Don't know where he went at that point. That part I didn't know. And he was the only priest in the parish. And so the Bishop of Charleston, whom I've attended one of his masses when we were at the beach, he came and said every single mass on this weekend, and he explained to the parish that he had to remove Father Bubba, okay? You know, because of a credible allegation that he'd been having a relationship with someone in the parish, and that at the present time he had nobody that could step into the parish. Just Well, the most interesting thing happened is that there was a groundswell of support and love for this priest.
Yeah.
That they went to the bishop in a number of different formats, letters, conference calls, meetings with the bishop, and said, we want him back. We want Father Bubba back. He is the best thing that's happened in this parish in a long time. And we miss him, and we can move beyond this. You know, we can get beyond this. And so I guess the side story is that he admitted to the relationship. I don't know what, anyways, and said that he seeks his parish's forgiveness. He seeks the forgiveness of everybody. And so that's kind of where it stood up to like a week or so ago, where the bishop then came and talked to the parish and said, I'm going to reinstate him. I'm going to reinstate him. Your love and support and affection for him, you're willing to move beyond it, and he's sought forgiveness for his sinfulness. And I thought, wow, because it made me think of another situation here in the diocese of a young man who was pastor of the largest parish in North Carolina, who a woman came forward and said that when he was a freshman in college, that he had abused her. And this was maybe like 25 or 30 years ago, kind of beforehand. And so he was instantly removed. It's like he evaporated. It was like he was taken by aliens out of the parish. No one knew anything. And then there's a letter to the parish from the bishop saying he's removed because there have been allegations, that kind of thing. Well, he's disappeared from sight. And a good friend of mine, who is a lay deacon, was really good friends with him. And I said, what would happen in this diocese if it turns out that the allegations are unfounded? And he said, it won't matter here because, he's been evaporated. He's just gone. And I thought, well, that's an interesting, different approach. So the Bishop of Charleston says we can forgive and move beyond adultery. But if someone has been accused of, it wasn't pedophilia that this guy did. He was a freshman in college, right. And he probably copped a feel from this girl or something like that, which you priests don't know what that means. But anyway.
Don't
Right,
be
right.
so sure about that.
To me, it's first of all, this thing that happened down at St. Mary's, I think, is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing. But then, why can't the church say we can move beyond? Not pedophilia. I'm not arguing that. Move beyond sexual indiscretions, before someone was a priest. I don't get why it's treated differently, but I wanted to share that good news story with you, because this parish obviously loved this priest and went to the nth degree to get him reinstated. And I thought that was beautiful.
So Tim, I thought you were going to say he quickly became Episcopalian, got married, and then was reinstated as a Catholic priest.
Well, no.
Can that happen if they're taking Episcopalians in as Catholic priests again?
Yeah, and so he's
No, I'm kind of being facetious, but
I know you are. I know you are. Yeah.
But
Tim, was the woman married,
I don't know that.
and was she white?
Yes.
That's interesting. So the whole race thing just didn't enter
Yeah.
into the discussion.
No, not at all.
It's South Carolina.
Yeah, no.
Right.
She wasn't underage.
No.
so I have a question for you, Fred, knowing that Sue is Episcopalian. Has she ever toyed with the idea of becoming Catholic, or is it just not relevant?
Yeah, it's not relevant.
Uh-huh.
He believes the same things I do.
Yeah, because you probably go to the Episcopal Church as much as you go to a Catholic church.
Correct.
Yeah, so you're kind of interreligious.
The big thing is that that the prayer book gave to the Episcopal Church the offices, and it was translated beautifully. And the revisions of the translations are still so much superior to what we hear in Catholic liturgies that it really is surprising to me that we can't come up with something like that. It would be worth borrowing theirs. So that was a wonderful thing. We did not give our people the office in that beautiful prose or any prose whatsoever. And that forms an awful lot of the spirituality, it seems to me, of Episcopalian. But what was said about Episcopalians in relation to their mission to people who really need help is tremendously edifying. I'm not saying that Catholic churches don't do that. They absolutely do. But so the thing is so much the same. On the other hand, our experience of having the ordinariate, my only experience of it was the person who was the pastor with the super high church, Episcopalian church in Boston, decided to become Catholic. And he was taken right on to be a pastor at a church to which we regularly went. And there's a certain way in which there's I would say, this is something I wonder about, whether it's mainly the so-called high church Episcopalians who are more liable to do what become Catholics because of their sensibility and also the feeling that they really are a minority in their own communion.
Mhm.
Their theology would be far less liberal and so forth. And so you have different kinds of course, different sensibilities among high church priests. But some are uptight. And this guy was particularly uptight. And so he felt more comfortable in the Roman Catholic fold than the others. So that's really my experience with that. One of the things that you really see the difference in the two different churches that we tend to go to most is that the number of people who are regular attenders at the Episcopalian Church is rather smaller, so that you really get to know people, so that having donuts and coffee at the Catholic Church with the mass of people you don't know isn't quite the same as the smaller communion of people that you meet and regularly have intercourse with and so forth. So that really has struck me, that the Catholic Church is paradoxically so numerous that what's meant by fellowship is really so minimal in a certain sense. Not that they're not salt of the earth people, they absolutely are. But you just don't have that sharing that you have in the other communion. Well, I was wanting to go back to what George was saying about uh, the German, the Jewish and German. I have a good friend who comes to BC occasionally. He's a moral theologian who teaches at the Opus Dei University in Rome, and he's a Jewish convert to Catholicism, and there was a whole spate of critiques of Pius XII for really betraying the Jews. And he wrote a tremendous article about how that just absolutely was not true. And it would have been different if someone who wasn't Jewish made that defense, but I kind of admired him for that. He's a very level-headed person whom I like. And I have another acquaintance who teaches at the St. John Seminary here, who's a Dominican and a member of Opus Dei. And he thinks, he sort of considers Father Ronheimer to be a loose cannon.
Huh.
I like loose cannons. I'm more,
Fred, can you find that article and email it?
yes, it was in First Things.
I think we're talking about the same article.
I had a feeling we might be.
Yeah, I could find it easily.
What's his
I'll
name?
send-
Good.
I don't know the name of the author, but he's a priest of Opus Dei.
Yeah, RHONHEIMER. I think his first name is Martin. I'm not absolutely sure of that, but last name is correct.
Could you pronounce it?
Ronheimer.
It's a very good article.
I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah. You know, on a related tangent, but I got to get this out. I had breakfast recently with Father Sandoval of the Archdiocese of LA, and Tim and Fred, I guess you don't know who he is, but he's not the Vicar General, Tom. What is he? He's the, I don't know, he's high up.
Director of something or other, a couple of things. I think he's the one who was,
He's head of pastoral ministries.
yeah, head of pastoral ministries, right?
And George, what does that mean in English? Pastoral ministries?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
As distinguished from, non-pastoral ministries.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
I guess, Holy Name Society, I don't know. I don't have a clue, actually. But he's very judicious, and I hope to gosh, he's a rising star. But we were talking about the topic we had talked about maybe 2 meetings ago, which is this unbroken phalanx of conservatism among these young clerics,
Yeah.
as seminarians. And I asked him, Father, how can this be? And his explanation was, well, first of all, they come into the seminary late these days, which is a good thing overall. And there is this parallel formation going on all the years before they get here. And then while they're in the seminary, and that's the internet. And they are being formed as right-wing little clerics on the internet all along, but before they entered the seminary and while they're in the seminary. And the priests of the seminary don't have a clue as to what to do about it. But they'll listen to a lecture in class, and then they'll go to their rooms and get online and listen to, some wacko on the internet. So that was a theory he had, for whatever it's worth.
Whom
And there's-
they believe is telling them the truth in distinction to the wacko professors at the seminary.
And there's
Say it
not a
again, Tom?
Lonergan, and there's not a Lonergan course in critical thinking and how you go through the
No.
steps of
Apparently
and
not.
come to valid judgments and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I said,
you know, that would be a
they
good,
think it's telling the truth in distinction to the wacko priests teaching at the seminary,
right.
Are they,
in
what
their
is-
estimation.
how are they wacko? Oh, you mean they?
They're-
think that the
In their
priests are
estimation.
wacko.
Yeah,
Okay, because, you know, if you go onto the internet, I mean, I did this a few times and you look up Catholic, whatever, there's a ton of, the responses are mostly these right-wing kinds of
Yeah.
people. There's not a lot of the other side.
well,
I-
and the other thing is, once you click on some of those, especially in Facebook, the algorithm just inundates you with similar stuff.
Yeah,
And then, you know, you can't, it becomes hard to find.
yeah.
uh,
I need to get this phone. It's my sister. I'll be.
So it seems, you know, does it seem to you that that would be a perfect question for Bob Bonneau to respond to and say, here's
Yeah.
my experience, or that's news to
Yeah.
me, or don't you think that would be a good topic to kind of,
Yeah, I do. What is his age?
Bob is a contemporary of us. He's in
Oh,
our
okay.
same
Okay.
class. Yeah, same
Okay.
class. So he's,
Okay.
but it would be interesting to see how he sees things in
Mhm.
that regard, because he could have a very, you know, whatever his book, Tom, you have his book, right? So you're reading it, but he
I
could
am
have a
beginning to
very,
read it, yeah.
he could have a very appealing image of what his idea of a future priest should be, but the currents that you described, George, could be so powerful that it won't be realized, you know.
I
or
just don't
realized.
understand how that can be. I attended a scripture course by the Archdiocese recently. And one of the lecturers on the Gospel of Mark, Tom, was Father Mullen from
Mhm.
St. John's, and he was excellent. He was scholarly, he is a believer, a wonderful guy. And the lecturer on the Gospel of Luke was this Polish priest. I don't know his name, but he was very good, very scholarly. And how these kids could sit there in the classes of men of that stature and just disregard them for these quacks on the internet is beyond me. I don't understand it.
There's a certain
when-
dynamic, you know, if you follow Jonathan Haidt
Yeah.
and his group and his way of thinking, you know, Haidt basically puts all of this, and of course, he's trying to analyze the Trumpian phenomenon, puts all of this with the development of the like button and the share button in Twitter and Facebook, that the algorithms behind them automatically connect you with people who are thinking in the same way. And so I don't think that these seminarians, for example, I don't think that they are listening to these classes and then going on to YouTube and finding their alternative points of view. I think they are participating in a minor way in the life of the seminary, including these classes, and then going on Twitter and Zoom and FaceTime and getting forming living communities of people who are thinking the same way.
Well, let me-
Okay.
It's
but
not
how could-
It's not
Yeah,
just that
yeah, let me-
they are you know, looking at alternative things but they are really in groups that are actively reinforcing one another. They're kind of in a positive feedback loop with these people.
Well, I think that's how Father Sandoval sees it, is the way you're articulating. But how can that be? I mean, you've
But-
got Mullins standing there in front of you, say 3 days a week, And he's engaged and he's charismatic and he's smart and he's holy. And he'll give you a research paper to do that'll plunge you into, some survey of serious thinkers and authors. And how can that not dent this?
So George, I have a answer for you. You're looking at the external person, Father Mullen, but there's, in each of the students, there's an operating system. Quod recipitur ad modum recipientis.
Recipitur, yes.
And this gets to Fred, the idea of Lonergan's group bias and common psychology, groupthink, and the emotional factor and what people decide to believe. And I don't know if there's anybody in the Lonergan community, Fred, who is addressing this whole thing of the internet and what's out there in terms of the data that people receive and how they can become critical of it to become more discerning. Because I think, Tom, what you're saying is that these people don't want to know what the truth is. They just want to, they belong to a group and they have this, it's like football teams and, fans at the stadium. They're all cheering and they're jumping up and down. It has nothing to do with the better team, but they're just emotionally involved in their team. So I don't
Everything
know.
is seen through their lens, and it's not a matter of they don't want to know the truth. It's a matter of this is the truth for me.
But they don't want to know the truth if it's not their truth.
That's right.
Don't you
Yeah.
think, don't you
And then
think,
they will accuse everybody else of exactly
Right.
the same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So they'll accuse Pat Mullins of being narrow and indoctrinated and drinking the Kool-Aid and all of that, all of those pejorative
okay,
terms.
so here's a thought then. It seems then that these young guys are bringing into seminary preconceived biases and opinions, and that maybe they're saying, and so my thinking as you're talking is, why do they want to be priests? Do they want to be priests because they want to right the ship that they think has failed or is sinking? Or do they come in saying, I'm a blank slate, let me learn from you? And so maybe the fact that the seminarians are coming after college, many of them, or after work experiences, maybe it was better when they got us when we were 13 or 14-year-olds. Because let's be honest, we were blank slates when we were in ninth grade. And so these kids are already the product of this society. And I mean, a friend of mine says, the seminary and the priesthood doesn't solve your own personal brokenness. You bring your brokenness in. I mean, I'm wondering if there should be a different manner of selecting who can become a priest, who can go to seminary.
The pool is not deep or wide.
Yeah.
So what did you say, George? I didn't hear you.
I said the pool is not deep or wide.
Okay, yeah.
You don't have
Yeah.
a big talent base. Yeah.
Well, Tom, can you tell us something about the tenor of Bonneau's book, since you've started it a little?
Not really, except that he's saying that he is coming from his own personal experience of what is behind what it means to him to be a priest. In other words, his reflection is not just here's my experience, but what is this experience teaching me about the actual theology of priesthood? I think he's trying to engage in the theology of priesthood from what I can gather, and come at it from let's say, theology from personal experience as a source of theology.
Right. But he knows a lot of theology.
He knows a lot of the theology. He was in Rome with you guys and has degrees, and he was
Who is this, George? Tom?
Bob Bano,
Oh, I don't know.
Bob
Oh,
Bernal.
okay, Bob, okay, yeah.
the, yeah. So I'm kind of interested in that. The other thing that keeps recurring to me, that very, very snarky response that I gave to George's talking about Parker Sandoval, that, you know, these guys are in, and I think they come to the seminary already plugged into these self-reinforcing feedback loop networks of very, very, let's rescue the ship, let's rescue the bark of Peter by going back to the authentic truth before all of these corruption of Vatican II and so on. You know, they're already into that social network of reinforcement. There doesn't seem to be a network, maybe it's developing a bit, of priests who are kind of really reinforcing one another in a more authentic view of what it means to be a Catholic priest, what it means to be a Vatican II Christian.
You know,
I'm just wondering if people like him and our what's his name, the formation of clergy and all of the formation of clergy people could begin to get some network of social media communication going among the mainstream priests of the archdiocese. That might be helpful to counter that networking that is already going on subversively with these subversive types.
Yeah, Tom, real quickly, I remember Subachek told me a number of years ago that he had gone on a retreat with the young priests in the diocese, archdiocese. Well, what do you mean, Norman? Well, was this to say, oh no, it was off campus. They just decided that the official retreat would be pablum or nonsense or whatever. And they just don't trust Mahoney any further than they could throw him, and are thoroughly alienated from the cardinal at the time.
Mhm.
And ergo, they have their own spirituality. I forget who gave the retreat. It might have been Benedict Geschel. I'm not sure of that,
Mhm.
but I don't know.
I'll be
I mean,
listening.
It's a scandal. I don't understand it. Tom, you mentioned the cardinal had recently said, okay,
Tom's taking a
Okay.
potty stop.
so that happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, I can't understand how they could just blow off ideas. I mean, you know, you think
Oh.
one way, that's fine.
Well,
You
they're blowing
hear
off
a-
the Pope. They're blowing off the Pope,
Yes, they are.
right? So that's against everything that you would think conservative people would be for. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
where's,
yeah.
where's the respect for the papacy?
you know, there was a story, Cordileone is the Archbishop of San Francisco, who came out with, he's not vaccinated, and because his
not,
doctor told him he
geez.
had such a great immune system, he didn't need to be. But anyway, there was a story that when he was in Oakland, he told the young priests that the Vatican II priests are the ones who ruin the church.
Okay.
So there's that kind of mentality. And I believe, you know, when the Second Vatican Council ended, there was always a group of curia people who never wanted the council to happen. And all the bishops went home and they got busy doing their work. And the guys who stayed in the curia, they managed to, they had their own way of keeping their anti-Vatican II thoughts alive. And they obviously got involved in seminary work, and John Paul II came along, and that he just helped to foster that. I mean, so we're seeing the result now. All these guys are being taught in seminaries, you know. But they're not all the same. I was going to tell Tom, I said, Welbers, I said, I was at a funeral a while back at St. John Vianney in Hacienda Heights with Tim Nichols.
Mhm.
And I met his associate there who seemed to me, I came back and I told somebody, I met a young priest who looks normal. You know, he strikes me as a more, he kind of like, you know, all he's interested in is trying to develop the parish and you know, I mean, I don't know what he's really like. I just very brief time with him, but he just struck me as not one of these ideologues, you know, they're not all the same.
A very quick point about the subversion of the council. Herbert, was on the Arctic Commission with the Anglicans, et cetera, you know, and he,
Who was?
Paul was fixed. And the Archbishop of Canterbury were going to issue some joint statement at the Vatican. And Herbert, being Herbert, goes out to the lectern, the podium, just to see what's there and make sure everything's organized, etc. And he opens the book with the statement in it, and it's completely different from what Paul and the Archbishop of Canterbury had agreed to and what Herbert had been involved in preparing. And he looks at it and it's like night and day. And it's sitting there, you know, with a ribbon on it and ready to roll. And he you know, I said, what'd you do? And he said, well, I just smiled and looked like I was arranging paperwork and took the statement as it then existed and went to the nearest typewriter and redid it entirely along the lines of the original statement, and then came back out, smiled, and looked like I was some officious old priest, and put the real one in. And that's what was read by Paul and the Archbishop of Canterbury. What? I mean, who would dare do that? I'm gonna substitute some document I like for a document that's already been approved by the Pope. You know, and I'm Monsignor Crookie or whatever I am in the Vatican. How would I dare do that? But they dare.
Mhm.
I have a comment. I thought George's analysis of the way that those people think in relation to the secular sphere, the Trumpies, and also in relation to the new breed, so to speak, is that it's a form of identity politics. And identity politics is going along with something that's not so hot about America, but never was so radically instituted, it seems to me, as now. And it is that we get our identity by whom we exclude. So we want to have our kids go to exclusive schools. We want to live in exclusive neighborhoods. We want to belong to exclusive clubs and so forth and so on. And there's that kind of way of, a certain way of asserting one's identity in a way that's exclusive, which goes against community and so forth. And what I noticed about both Tom and Gary is that when they have these, when Tom was working on campus ministry, and then it sounds like Gary's day-to-day life, when they were pastors, they always assumed that the persons of other faiths that they worked with, that what they shared in common was much greater than what separated them.
Absolutely.
And so the assumption was that, okay, we have some differences, but what we share is much more important than what separates us. And I think that's such a praiseworthy way of being, by comparison to the identity politics, which is so much a case now, not only, I'm finding out from you guys, not only in the political order, but also outside inside the seminary. It's a political thing. And certainly if there was a hallmark of Vatican II, it was an openness to realize that we shared with people of other religions and other denominations and sects and so forth, more than separates us. And I think that spirit is just kind of waning. And I think if a person has puts there what makes me different from everybody else as what's most important, that certainly is a wacko way to operate.
So may I piggyback on your thought, Fred, and Gary? I'm thinking of Holy Redeemer Parish in San Francisco, which was in the Castro. It's in the Castro district, and I know of it because here's a little personal history. You know Al Crow?
Yeah,
Okay, well,
who doesn't?
my brother,
Oh, yeah, you're talking about Dick and Lolly. Yeah, okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
Dick and Roz. Okay, Dick and
Yeah.
Dick. So Dick and Roz, I officiated at their wedding. Roz Gallo, wonderful,
Yeah,
both of them. But Roz came out as gay. So my brother and Roz divorced. And then Roz met Al's
why?
ex-wife, Kathy, and they partnered,
Yes,
and they went to Holy Redeemer Parish in the Castro where they lived. A wonderful parish, right? And it could be equally Episcopal as Catholic because it's open and so Corleone comes in and did exactly what you said, Fred. These are othered. These are people we want to exclude from being in good standing. And so anyway, the short of it is that's an example of where there was a wonderful parish. And I don't know what happened, Gary, you probably know more about it than I do, but then somebody came in and they totally wanted to redo it. I don't know how it is now, but anyway, so I don't know. To me, that's an example of being more accepting and then reverting back to excluding people.
Whose phone is that?
it's mine, and I'm
Mine.
just waiting for it to end. I don't want to, I'm just waiting for it to end. How long does it go on?
Hit the on button.
I don't want to decline it. I just want to let it end because it's a
Okay.
friend of mine, and I'll call him back.
Did I hear you say that Al Crowell's wife
Yes, yes. Kathy
came out of the closet,
and married.
No,
Yeah,
well, yeah,
or
right.
maybe?
Married my brother's wife. Yes.
God, jeez.
Both of whom
I had-
attended.
And they're very-
Yes, his next wedding, because I was there.
And they're
I met
devoted,
Ron.
and they're both devoted Catholics.
and they were both
Roz
very,
and Kathy.
the two of them were both deeply involved in the Archdiocese of San Francisco at one point.
Yeah,
Under what's his name? Well, George Quinn,
Levada?
John
Quinn,
Quinn,
yeah, Quinn, yeah.
and Levada, and
Niederauer.
he's, our old George,
Niederauer.
huh? Niederauer, yeah.
And so I'm
But I'll find out more, George, because since Warren Holleran is I'm no longer able to really visit with Warren. I still go down to the Sarah Retirement House, and I meet with Tony McGuire, who was the pastor of Most Holy Redeemer for many years. He's a great priest. He's in our era. He's a couple years older than we are. I'll find out what happened since Corleone has come in.
not to be crude, but if my wife said, I am a lesbian and I'm going to marry a friend of, would my masculinity be at risk? I just can't imagine what Al must have gone through.
Oh,
They were
poor
already
Al.
divorced.
It's not- it's
Al
not
and
no
Kathy
attempt.
were.
What did you say, George? What did you
I
say?
said, poor Al did not exist in this equation. There was no poor Al Kroll.
Al, Al,
There was not, okay,
Tim,
Yeah, it
Al
was
and
poor
Kathy,
Kathy.
Tim, Al and Kathy had been divorced long before that.
okay, okay.
They were parishioners. The Crowells were parishioners up in Ukiah where I was. Joe and
Okay.
James Crowell, wonderful people. And they were very close to Kathy and her two boys. And they were lovely people. Al was already out of the picture.
Oh, he was,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I knew them very well, Joe and Thais.
What a weird world. God.
Well, but look at it this
Well-
way. It gave Al a complete excuse for the failure of his marriage.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there were a lot of things going on there before Kathy came to this realization.
Yeah.
Gosh. Oh, okay.
But I brought that up because of what Fred, it goes back to the politicization of, exclusivism. Who can we
Yeah.
exclude and who can we say they're not, in San Francisco, to me, Corleone was the biggest slap in the face of San Franciscan Catholics. A terrible thing to have appointed him there.
This was the
Yes.
bad judgment of Benedict for
George, that was Raymond Burke, who
Was
was
it?
on the Congregation of Bishops, and his aim was to change the West Coast Church. And so we got Basha, and then Oakland got Corleone. Corleone went to San Francisco, and they have this guy named Barber, who's a Jesuit, but a very, thinks along the same lines,
And then we got Gomez.
And you
At the
guys
same
go-
time.
Yeah. Who,
Yeah.
by the way, Tom, I want to congratulate you. You're the National Catholic Reporter.
Isn't that great?
Sir Archbishop is the biggest newsmaker of the year.
I didn't see that.
Well, take a look at the
I have to
latest
check.
edition, because
Oh,
because
It's
of
very
all,
well written too. It's a.
Is that
it's a
because of the-
keeper.
because
Because
all
of
the
bad
poor
news?
Huh?
Because of bad news?
Yeah, because of all the poor leadership of the unit of the
Poor
US,
leadership is, yeah.
he's the worst.
well, that statement he issued to Spain
Yeah.
is like off the charts stupid, lack of judgment. Which reminds me, Mike, I had a very long conversation with Mike Clemens about that. I forwarded you guys an email before our meeting from Ned about Mike Clemens, who's
Yeah.
now in intense hospice.
Who's this?
And, huh?
Who?
Mike Clemens. Who said who? Tim, was that you?
Me,
Yeah.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Oh, he was like 3 years behind us in the seminary.
What's his name?
Mike Clemens.
Oh, yes, okay.
And
Kind of a big guy.
yes, a big guy, and he is dying
Oh,
of pulmonary fibrosis, and
Here.
just went up a step in or down or whatever it is in that journey. And he's very close to Ned, and I've known Michael for years and admired him, and I've taken him communion several times over the last couple months, and it's just very inspirational. He's a hero of the faith, and in a very non-heroic age. What can I say?
Mhm.
We'll keep him in our prayers, George.
Please do, please do.
Yeah.
He's just he has spent his life doing good, as
Mhm.
Peter said of Jesus. He, from the time he quit the seminary, circa 1968, he was a community organizer. for the, what do you call it, the back of the yards, Olinsky.
IAF.
IAF, yeah.
IAF, yeah, thanks. In Texas. I mean, 22 years old, recently married, they sent him to Texas and off he went. I don't know where he was in Texas. I want to say Dallas, but I'm not sure. Came back, got involved with cops no, cops is in San Antonio. The local outfit.
The local one.
Is there something called UNO? No?
Yeah, that's it.
UNO.
Uno was one of them. EVO was another. SCOC was another. They had under Mahoney, there were about 5 different organizing networks that were all united.
Became a very trusted advisor of the Cardinal on social issues. And, spent his life that way. Most recently and lastly, he started an educational advocacy service with NED in Orange County for disabled kids under the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and made no money, but for 13 years, that's what they did, Ned and Michael. So, as Kurt Vonnegut would say, so it goes.
And how is Ned doing?
I don't
Speaking of
know. I only inferred from the emails among you all that he had COVID until he sent me the thing last night. And the last time I talked to, I'm in Hawaii right now, but the last time I talked to him was several days ago.
You're where?
Hawaii.
I keep wondering who these attractive women are that walking in and out of your hotel room back there.
My daughter and wife.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And, but thank you. I'll tell them you said that.
Are you in Hawaii, George?
Yes.
You are? Oh,
Yeah, I was wondering why you had that fan going there.
yeah,
Yeah. And, Gary, everybody's got to be somewhere.
absolutely. Right now, I'm hunkering down because I was exposed to COVID on Monday night. I went to a family gathering and turned out the next day, one of the daughters tested positive. So I've kind of shut out, like canceled all kinds of things and
Kind of isolating yourself.
yeah, but I've been tested negative twice. I mean, and on that antigen test, and I'm supposed to say mass tomorrow in Cloverdale at 9 o'clock and also on Sunday. And I talked to a doctor, and as long as I don't have any symptoms, I'll just wear my mask. So
Yeah, and
but
plus
I'd rather isolate in Hawaii.
Yes. But I'm not isolated, so
No, you're not. No.
it's a wonderful place. Maui. But I don't know how ill Ned is. Do any of you guys know?
no, I guess
He
we
and
can,
Darlene both have it.
yeah.
Um,
But before we end, do you want to go back to the original question that Johnny, you raised about what do we want to do with Bob Bonneau and Frank Daly? To bring most of the
Thank you,
conversation.
because I do think,
There was one additional thing, because we had tentatively thought of inviting Brian Drolet next
for
week.
next week, that's right. And
And I don't know
so,
if you have followed through on that at all.
well,
haven't.
I was planning to follow through based on our conversation here.
Right.
And I don't know, George, what do you think? You want to give it a 2-week?
Oh, sure,
window?
because there's no rush.
Now, the
Fred,
other
you're
thing,
gonna- Fred, you're
the
gonna be
other thing to
back
bear in
teaching.
mind is we can invite, but if it has to fit their schedule, even if they're interested.
Sure.
Correct.
But
Yeah,
you
I,
want me to get in touch with them and propose without
That-
giving a date and just
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
propose a
And
concept?
maybe just say the 14th or the 21st.
Yeah.
as it so happens, the Drolet family that we knew and loved had just splintered all over the place. And I was involved in representing one of the sisters, Patrice, John, really against all the rest of them. And a long, long story. But I had occasion to speak to her about a week ago, and Steve, the young man with Down syndrome, is apparently dying, or at least quite ill. And of course, they're at each other's throats again. And amazing. It's just amazing how that happened. But anyway, Patrice happened to mention to me that Brian has remarried, having divorced Kathy, and is now living on Park Avenue in New York, which intrigues me. He always did have a taste. It is most, toppled everybody moments. He nevertheless had a taste for luxury. I intend to ask him if living on Park Avenue, he at least is able to retain his useful idiot status. But I don't know how that would be received, so maybe I shouldn't. But
Well, keep it in your back pocket,
yeah,
ready to pull it out.
I'm all for it. What the hell?
The only thing I could ask, I was just looking at my calendar, on the 21st, it's the Friday, I have a doctor's appointment at 11:30. It's a cardiologist, just a checkup.
Okay,
So if we could do it any other, and then
okay.
I think the 28th, something's going on the
Is that
28th. But the 7th or the 14th would be, I'm just interested. I would love to sit in on that kind of conversation.
I have a favor to ask then. John, I have no idea what Brian's been doing for the last 5 or 6 decades. If anybody knows, I would love to kind of get a little bit of background on him and what he's been doing before he comes on the show. Is that too much to ask?
No, I could give you a call, Tim.
And I think George Crook is probably our best candidate for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was very current with Brian up till 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and
12
I
years
saw
ago.
Brian on YouTube. Just
What?
3 years ago, he was in Europe talking to a group of radicals about the role of the arts in protest. So if you could
Okay.
Google, why don't you Google his name on YouTube?
I will. And
But,
George,
uh,
George, when are you hanging up the surfboard and coming home?
January 18th, about
18th. 18th.
unless, we have this place for a month at a time each year. Unless my friend Krikor Tarosian, the 92-year-old Armenian that shined the boots of the SS on the streets of Athens, and Michael die, in which case I'll come back for their funerals, and the odds that one of them will die any minute are quite high.
And so I'll give you a call this week, George.
Yeah.
I'll call you
Okay.
this week. Yeah,
Okay,
after the holiday.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I would
George,
very
is-
much like to
is
be,
Mike Malloy, I'm sorry, George Crook, is Mike Malloy on your agenda while you're there?
No,
Okay.
only because he's on a different island. I would love to see him. And that's a thought. I'll talk to my spouse about that.
Tim,
yeah.
Tim and George, I would love to get in on that conversation too, because I have had no contact.
Okay, okay,
with
maybe we'll
them
set up a
at all.
conference call.
Oh,
Okay.
But
We'll-
somehow set that up.
I'm gonna begin to bug out here, so.
I
Okay,
do too,
Well, let
guys.
me show you something first, Gary. Here's a book by everybody's friend, some more than others, Bishop Barron, that I've been reading about the Eucharist. And I'm finding it very, very good. I don't have the theological sophistication that Tom has or Fred has by any means, or you, Gary. But
Oh, I don't know.
I'm finding it very balanced.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah.
And he's not just a mere literal real presence guy. I mean, he's talking about the Eucharist, the sacrifice and meal and all of that. And I'd love it if one of you guys read that and could, favor us with your thoughts, like it's
Yeah, I don't want to
superficial
be,
or
I don't want to
profound.
be irreverent, but it looks like he got Mel Gibson to do the cover.
Well,
You know,
I-
Yeah.
that is really kind of, I don't know. It doesn't strike me right, but
Well, his content thus far doesn't reflect the cover, and I'm in the
Yeah.
last several pages.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was edified by Tom's statement that, of course, the real presence is a real thing. I'll bet Ned thinks you think it's not. I don't know. Isn't the debate really simply, is the real presence the whole thing, or is that where we start?
Yeah, is transubstantiation the only thing to care about when you talk about real presence?
Yeah, okay, and I don't think
Well-
Ned would say it is.
Yeah. No,
But Barron
Well-
really draws out the whole universal sacramental aspect of it, you know?
yeah, I just want to, from an ecumenical point of view, present the possibility that the Quakers who would have none of that, do they have a real presence when they get together? And do Buddhists have it? And do atheists who are doing good in different ways, that there's other types of real presence? I think that has to be brought up alongside any sacramental real presence, which can be made so important that it distracts from all the other types of real presence.
or
Um,
are they themselves in some way sacramental, manifesting
Exactly.
the real presence?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Beats me.
I've got the book too.
Oh, look
Well,
at that.
what you
Okay.
think, Tom?
Well, he just kind of talks about all of these things as aspects. I see the identity of the community, if you will, the identity of the Eucharistic assembly and their whole life as being the focus of real presence, of which then the real presence in the Eucharist is a manifestation, if you will. In other words, I put the primacy of presence in what St. Paul does. Don't you realize that you are members of the body of Christ?
I don't think he would disagree.
He wouldn't disagree,
So-
but he's not putting that as central from which the rest of these things derive. That's I'll tell you what, this week I'm going to reread this fairly quickly and make some notes as I'm reading it, and then maybe be prepared to share them at least.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm gonna check out.
Okay, Gary.
I just want to say, George, I'm amazed that you brought a book like that with you to Hawaii. I'm impressed. Anyway, I hope you all have a good.
Can I have I have a
just finished
suggestion.
reading a novel on my iPad by, what's his name?
Okay,
Daniel
before-
Silva. So what the heck?
before Gary goes, let's have a concluding prayer by someone for this dear friend of George's.
Oh, for Mike Clemens.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I met Mike when I was kind of involved in IAF at one point, so.
And so
Chances
Gary,
are high.
Okay,
so
I'll just make one up. Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Oh Lord, we spent some time together here, and George has reminded us of Mike Clemens and described some of what he's done. And I can only think that it was to bring your presence to Texas and other places by action and word. And so we think of him now as he's going through another journey of which none of us have experienced, but we are on the same road. So we put our arms around each other here and Mike in the middle and put our arms on him in solidarity and in prayer and lending him support with love and fellowship as you did with your disciples and followers. Amen.
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 Happy New Year, guys.
Same to
Happy
you.
New
To
Year.
you.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year.
It's a blessing. Love you all.
Thank
Shall
you.
we call it quits for all now?
So I'm
Yes.
gonna go for January 14th for Bob Bonneau and Frank Daly.
Good.
Okay,
How's
Good.
that?
That's
good.
fine. Yeah, that'll
Okay.
be great.
Wait, who's calling real late to
Okay.
pick a date?
Grammar.
Johnny is.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well,
Goodbye, guys.
I'll
Bye.
report right
Bless
away.
you all.
All right.
and
God bless.
Bye.
take